are you going to change the world?
Starting with myself, study all I can, try to get this Renaissance man type of approach to the world, try to just not necessarily be a jack of all trades, but in a certain context for sure. But I've got my things I want to master. Like I want to be a philosopher. And obviously I have no formal education. So it's all self-taught and watching YouTube lectures. When I get to the point to where I'm around somebody, maybe I could get private or one-on-one mentorship from in that domain, then we move into that later on in the future too. So that's what I want to master, is like sort of philosophy, theology. But I think it's good really for anybody to just approach the knowledge landscape in general by exploring like a bunch of different shit, because then you'll know you'll have a better idea of what you do enjoy the most, what you don't like and don't want to mess with and don't even want to touch. And so not only it gave me more purpose, I'll just put it that way. It gave me more of a sense of purpose, and it helped me find what I genuinely wanted to do with the rest of my life in terms of like professionally and the development of myself in the professional domain and the educational context. Because before that, like I was clueless, just like most other people right now. I was definitely not a very conscientious person. And I was always getting into trouble, and that the whole backstory of my life, which I won't get into in a whole bunch of detail right now, but it's been a transformation.
So here's what I have to say: there are three teachers in your life. The ones you look for because you're interested in what they have to say. Three types of teachers, and then there's your family. They'll always be one of the hardest teachers. And then there's your relationships, the ones you create with the people around you, especially the intimate ones where you're seriously co-involved. And I think a lot of people try to avoid the hard ones and go to the easy ones, almost like people like entertainment more than they like education. So, and then a lot of education turns into entertainment for some reason. So I think I have to say, as much as a person might try to avoid it, your family and your relationships are going to continue to be one of your main teachers. And if you avoid them, well, you can't avoid them. They'll dog you forever. So you either figure out a way to engage them, or you'll be running away from them. Mm-hmm. And so, you had some family trouble, but see it as an opportunity. And then you have some, everyone's got parent trouble. It's like amazing. But I think it's a cultural problem. I think other cultures didn't have such parent problems. I might be wrong. Because, I have Chinese friends. Well, it's hard to judge. So, one of the people in the book I wrote was a Chinese girl, and she said, we never contradict our parents. She says, an Asian tradition, never contradict your parents. Well, I could see that would be a problem for me. But, maybe it creates a different kind of foundation. I don't know. You certainly can't rely on your parents as much if you're never going to contradict them. It means you're never going to bring up everything that's important to you, because you got to take whatever they say as, gospel, and that's they don't know. So, but then my problem was that I never could get good advice from my parents. So, except in some cases.
I haven't either.
Some cases, my father took me as an assistant in his work, and there I saw him be serious. And that was a learning that I could accept. It wasn't particularly relevant at the time, but it was real. It was real people doing real things with real consequences.
So how you were talking about, you learned from the three different teachers, and I actually think depending on how you break it down, there's probably a whole lot more than that if you want to personify other things that are not like people or relations. But those specifically, the three sources of learning that you had mentioned, they're all things that are inescapable entirely, even if you're not conscientious of the learning that's taking place. And I think if you're not conscientious of the learning that's taking place, especially in those contexts and environments, then you're not going to get as much positive out of it as you will otherwise. And I say that because your environment, the things that most influence you are the things that you're constantly surrounded by, like your environment, what you consume, your quality of thought, the quality of thought that surrounds you and that you're exposed to. These are all things that just living your life, you're going to be influenced by. And so that's a form of education. Like you're being taught certain things about that sort of play into your view of the world and your view of life and everything around you, even on subconscious levels that are not even necessarily immediately perceptible or, that can be acknowledged or that you can be aware of at all times. So,
right.
And I mean, 95% of our brain, maybe more, I think it's 95% is subconscious on a day-to-day basis. Anyways, like 95% of us is programming that unless we've intentionally went and reprogrammed it and taught ourselves in certain contexts, then it's still playing that years 1 to 7 programming.
Yeah. Well, so I'm a therapist, and so that's what sort of some of the stuff I deal with. And it comes up. I mean, it's interesting because people think that they're 95% in control, and then it turns out they're 95% not in control. And but you got to think you are. I mean, it's sort of like you can only see what you can see, and then what you can't see, the 95% you can't see, doesn't seem to exist because you can't see it. So you always think you're in control because it's all you see. And then how do you get in control of what you don't see? And it's like, okay, you kind of have to dig it out. It's like you have to scrape the paint off to see what's underneath it. And it's sometimes painful and it's sometimes disruptive and a lot of other things. You didn't have it on your schedule that, I'm going to spend the next, honestly, we're going to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out my childhood.
Still probably wouldn't.
So my job is to like convince you to look at some things that maybe you didn't look at and think about some ideas that maybe you didn't want to, or maybe, whatever. And ultimately I'm looking for some epiphany. I'm sort of like, I'm trying to like strike a match that illuminates something in you. Because if I'm enlightened, that doesn't help you.
Right.
But, if I have some answer that you don't know how to put in practice, it's not helpful.
And how do you bestow or bequeath conscientiousness? It's like,
you say a lot of shit. You say stupid ideas. You say incendiary, disruptive, and some people rise to it and they say, okay, maybe, or yes, I feel that might help, or you do understand the problem I'm in, and other people flee from it. They don't want to take the responsibility. They don't want to hear your solution because it's not as sweet as the one they want to hear.
Right.
And unfortunately, those people don't make a lot of progress because that's what they've been trying to do and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's one of the reasons, when I interrupt you there, it's one of the reasons people get ill, I think, physically ill, is because too much conflict. And it just ends up bringing them down. Stress, friction, anger, tension, a need to compensate with drugs or food or
absolutely
cigarettes or stuff like that.
The story of everybody in my entire life, almost up until the last few years. And it's I agree with you when you say the whole, when you had brought up the epiphanies, and because like my situation specifically, mine happened in a very natural way. Because like I was saying earlier, I wasn't a very conscientious person before. I didn't even know who I was really for the first 19 years of my life. And then when my son was about to be born, it highlighted things in me because I was supposed to die by 2020. Because I have cancer, right? So then there's that situation. And then I also wasn't supposed to have kids because of the chemo treatments ongoing and so on. So there's two things that happened that I wasn't expecting to. I was on drugs in the streets, criminal at this point, like purely, in not in a justifiable manner. And so when this happened, I was like, wow, it was like a shock. And so because of the nature of what happened, I always wanted kids too, because I wanted my own family, because I never had my dad. So I was like, okay, well, I want this because I know I can do better, even though I couldn't at that time. And so it highlighted things. Long story short, it highlighted things in me psychologically and just made me aware of certain things that I did not want to be the case for my son. And it was like two significant epiphanies I had relatively close to each other in time. And then it set off like a motion of just a whole bunch very consistently. And it ended up turning me from like a hood rat, low life, going nowhere, gonna either die from the streets or die from my health condition and no future ahead of him, to somebody who wants to be a philosopher now and is completely self-educated. So it's like significant changes, and it's very possible literally for anybody. And I hope there's somebody that will listen to this video specifically right now who is in a similar position, or maybe like who needs to hear this, because like, and even then it may not help, but for me, it was looking back on it is surreal, because it was a very natural process, and I don't know how it ever happened, but I know that it can happen for literally anybody if it happened for me the way that it did. Absolutely.
Well, I would advise you, which is a funny thing because I don't know shit. I would advise you that, your passion is what it is the key to unlocking other people. That's certainly important for yourself. But, your passion, your story, or conveying your story in a passionate way is the thing that will, I mean, I have to be kind of cynical here. It's almost like a performance art. If you can be dramatic, people will stand up and take notice. And that's kind of cheap, but it's true.
I mean, it is true.
If you're not crying and screaming and gnashing your teeth, people, they'll go on to somebody else who is. So, it's like Jordan Peterson is funny because he has a few good things to say, but mostly he's emphatic. He's opinionated, and he's, going to piss you off. And that's why people watch him. I think they miss half the stuff he says, or 90% of the stuff he says. But they just like, he's a fun guy to watch. He's got a real opinion. And that's, so it's kind of like a little depressing, because it's like Donald Trump. They don't really know what he says, but he's a guy who's fun to watch, and he's a good speaker, and he really has a point. And it's like, it's better than the game show. So, and then you're going to say, well, but this is life. This is 90% of the population. So, if you want them to raise up their consciousness, then you got to talk to them in their language, which is emotional. So, I think, your story and your ability to affect people comes with, so you can say that I'm going to be a philosopher, and people say, I'm going to change the channel. But you got to say what it means. What?
Yeah.
I mean, you do whatever rings the bell, but still, it's like, if you want to communicate with people, you have to grab them by the collar and shake them with something interesting.
Especially in the burnout society, in the age of overstimulation and refusal to delay gratification. You got 60-second videos and extremely short attention spans. So yeah, absolutely. Right.
256 character messages. But anyway, so here we have talked for an hour about, we still haven't any focus, but I think that's kind of fine, because it's really about, at least in my estimation, about how you get things moving. Education, enthusiasm, emotion. We could talk about mental health, but we've sort of, mental health is like, so there's two aspects of mental health. There's like thinking you're sick and you need to be fixed, and then thinking you have potential and you need to advance. Two sides to the same thing. And some people focus on one. My problems, I'm neurotic, or I'm paranoid. Life is giving me a hard time, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. So, okay, but I try to do whatever the other person isn't. So if you're focusing on your dysfunction, I'd like to say, don't focus on your dysfunction. It's an opportunity. It's all the shit that's coming at you. Now, how are you going to turn it into something good?
Exactly.
And, and sometimes clients don't like to hear that. They need to feel disabled, and maybe they are. Some people are disabled. Okay. Maybe you do consistently have the wrong impression of what's going on around you. And then I have other people as clients who are high performers, and they're worried about the most mundane things, like what professional decision they're going to make in their life, which is important, but not as much as, trying to cope with your abusive past. And sometimes they're harder for me to deal with because they're so full of information. They're so full of details and options and changes and decisions. It's like I can't keep up with them, and I'm not in their scene, so it's all like new to me. It's easier to deal with like the sick people because they say, "Oh, woe is me, I can't think straight," and then I say, "Oh well, I can nurse them along."
Yeah.
It's sort of much easier, and then they're happy. Oh, you helped me, and you enforced and believe in me, and it's sort of like it's frustrating. It's like theater again. Some people like your performance and other people don't. And you've done your best in either case. And some people, like the publisher, won't publish my book. It's like, no, fuck you. After a while, like my performance. I have to say that your failures are more useful than your successes. The successes
Absolutely.
are nice, and they make
And they
life
far
feel
outweigh
good.
your successes too.
Yeah, number
Always.
right. But I mean, so that's like how much bitter medicine do you want to drink in order to be? So you say you'd like to be a philosopher. Well, that's kind of like, that's the sweet stuff. Oh, you read stuff, it makes you inspired, and you think, yeah, but I hate to say it, you'll probably develop more by dealing with the assholes in your life who aren't philosophers and who violate all the good rhetorical, logical rules.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's easy to say, oh, life should make sense and we should make good decisions based on the information we have. Oh, well, okay, that's nice. But
to intellectualize,
look at the world.
it's almost like fantastical to purely intellectualize it, though, which is why like Stoicism gets a lot of respect, even from interdisciplinary in total. Like it gets a lot because there's an empirical element there that's tested against real life. It factors in.
Well, I was interested in science, so I thought science would be an answer, but it turns out that science is done by people, and people are just as screwed up as everyone else. And science doesn't answer the question of how to live a good life or how to feel rewarded.
I think that's
depressing.
I think there's like general guidelines that we could all just as humans follow to get more out of our subjective experiences that lead to a more meaningful life. But ultimately, I think what is going to lead towards a meaningful life is going to not only vary from individual to individual, so it's subjective in that sense, but also I think that agency, like service, is one of the biggest things that we can do. Everybody, even people who might hear this and be like, no, that's just not the case. I hate people. I'm introverted or any of this. Like I'm introverted too, but I'll tell you one thing. Whenever I do something for someone and I genuinely mean it, I do it because I genuinely want to, and it genuinely helps somebody and they appreciate it. There's no feeling like that. There's no other feeling like that. And I think if more people expose themselves to agency in that regard in some way, it would unlock a new perspective on reality for a lot of people. I think it would help a lot of people.
I think you're right. Absolutely. And I think a fair number of people accept that and understand that and do that. There is like I said at the very beginning, I like to be sort of sadistic, and because there is a cynical. No, is it cynical? No, that's the wrong word. There is a flip side to it, in that sometimes you're helpful when you annoy people. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to show them their own shit.
Yeah,
it really is. It's like, I had a smoker come to me who wanted to learn to stop smoking, and I told him, "You're not serious. It's not going to happen."
Well, that can be helping people though, like helping people.
Well, it is.
Agency
But
looks
they were
different.
pissed off. They didn't like what I said, so they left. And I thought, well, okay, but that's really the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's, you put me in the position to say that, and I did. And then you are pissed off because I said it, and you left. And that was your decision. But it's at some point you're going to keep getting that message until you realize that it's the truth.
Yep.
And so some of my clients are like that. They're usually the clients that don't come back. And then the ones that do come back and say, "Oh, you inspired me. You've helped me so much." It's like, yeah, I told you what you wanted to hear, and now you're happy. Did I really do anything? Or did I just feed you the sugar that you set me up for? And I don't know. As the role as a counselor is, no. Because if they really succeed, they don't come back to you, and you don't know. And if they really fail, they don't come back to you, and you don't know. And you have to be okay with that.
Somebody on the opposite end of that. So like growing up, I was in mental health facilities, like insane institutions like Peninsula in Knoxville, for example, Kingston Academy, because I was very homicidal, suicidal at certain points of my life, just chaotic. And so I will say on the completely opposite end of that, from my perspective back then, I had this bad habit, especially when I didn't have control over where I went. So in terms of me getting locked up in one of these facilities, I didn't want to be there. And so I would try to learn how to play the game and tell them what they wanted to hear, and then make the conversation go into like a superficial manner to where everybody got what they wanted on the face of everything.
Yeah.
But nobody actually got any sort of assistance from it. And it's almost like this courtier type of game that's being played, at least with me and several people that I knew that were in situations like that. And so nobody was getting help, but it appeared, if you look at it from face value, because it was just a bunch of manipulation happening, basically.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's, and so, I mean, then you can keep turning it around, say that's bad or that's good. It's like, how are you going to get the best of a bad situation?
You as
Probably
the individual have to face your own shit and accept reality for what it is, and accept that suffering is part of life's existence.
Okay, well, let me turn that around. Apply that to school. All right. Now you're in school. This is the shit they're giving you. How are you going to turn that around to make it the best for yourself? Are you going to play along with it? Or are you going to be the bad guy and say, I won't put up with it? You don't know. You kind of have to try both, see which works out. Maybe they'll throw you out. And, one of the kids in my book said, in 10th grade, I realized I wanted to be a filmmaker, and they weren't teaching me filmmaker. So I dropped out, and I was really afraid that I was going to be screwed. But I kept at it, and now I'm a filmmaker. I learned it myself, and I realized that school was not going to take me there. So, he could have gone along. He chose not to go along, but not going along wasn't the end of it wasn't success immediately. Then he had to start working. Whereas going along, it's just like you could go along for the rest of your life and never get anywhere. Go along, right? Go along, get a job, buy a house, get a mortgage, get married, have kids, go nowhere.
I wouldn't even consider myself like in terms of financially, I'm not even really successful right now. I'm certainly on my way.
Me neither.
But man, I will say that one thing that I've noticed from studying successful people, and this is why I've adopted this mindset myself, and also because of its utility, obviously, but believing in yourself, as cliche as that sounds, it really is like if I had to pick one thing that was the fundamental key to any person's success, especially in the professional regard, it would be belief in themselves, in their own capacity and capability of doing something, even if they don't know how to do it when they're approaching it. Because, and I say that, and here's the logic behind it. If you believe in yourself and you know for a fact that you can do something and nobody can tell you otherwise, then it doesn't matter how many times you fail, because you know at the end of the day you will succeed regardless, which means success is the only option for you. Like burn the ships.
I think that's really the point. I really think that's the point. Let's do this again. Maybe we'll be able to not have so many breaks. Well, I mean, this was sort of like the get to know you, focus on the issues thing. But I'd be happy to talk about it more because I think we're only getting started in many of these topics.
Absolutely.
I don't know. But again, it's the question like, what does the listener get out of it? They get our enthusiasm. We think we're going to come to some conclusion. Well, we're not. And maybe people are going to, what we really want to do is get people inspired to take control of their lives.
Yep.
Not for us to control their lives or give them any answers, right? So just like say, oh, wake up. We think we're waking up. You could, we don't know if we are, but we're dealing with shit and we see it's important. And you look out in the world and there's endless amounts of shit out there. And it's way beyond, like the wars. I get so bent out of shape about these wars. It just seems such bad behavior on a massive scale. I can't get behind war on either side. They're all fucked up to me. The defenders, the aggressors, the whole process of killing people to move forward is, so it was like business. I got pissed off at the US, so I moved to Canada because I just wanted to feel that I could vote with my feet. Right. I don't have to, get stuck in the. So now I'm a dual citizen. Not that the grass is any greener over here, but whatever. It's a different scene, slightly, almost like a different country. So let's get together and talk again.